afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Public Health's virtual education series, Wažookį, Family Conversations. I'm Renelle, public health nurse, joined by Jamie, CHR supervisor, who will help moderate today's session. The goal of the series is to gather, learn, and share about Ho-Chunk culture, resources, services, and the connection to health. In public health, we focus on prevention, promotion, and protection of the health and well-being of our communities. Health and well-being are rooted in many aspects of our lives, from our physical body, our mental health, our spirit, the environment we live in, and much more. During these sessions, we will explore topics that can impact our health and well-being. Together, we will learn about tools and resources to improve our health and the health of our communities. Today, we're happy to be joined by Bella Schuelke. Bella is an honors nursing student at UW-Madison. She will be addressing intimate partner violence in pregnant Indigenous women. We'll have about 45 minutes for Bella's presentation, followed by a Q&A. Please use the chat function to enter any comments or questions for our presenter. Jamie and I will monitor the chat throughout the presentation and read the questions for Bella at the end. You can also raise your hand and come off mute during the Q&A to ask your questions out loud. Any questions that we don't have time for, we will forward off to Bella and email responses back to the group. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the Department of Health website and the Facebook page. Everyone, please welcome Bella.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm very appreciative that you all are here as well. As Renelle introduced, I'll be talking about intimate partner violence in pregnant Indigenous women. So I'll jump into a little bit about what we'll talk about throughout the presentation, and then we'll go from there. So I'll first start by giving a little introduction about myself and my background. And then we'll share some testimonials from Indigenous women who experienced IPV. We'll talk about some definitions about what IPV is and some other interrelated concepts. And then we'll put all the concepts that we talked about at the beginning kind of all together in a more clear picture for everybody. I'll share a little bit about what you can do as the general public, as healthcare providers. And then I'll share some resources for anybody who might be experiencing IPV themselves. Finally, we'll finish with a conclusion, and I'll thank you again for your presence today. So I first wanted to share a little bit about me. My name is Bella Schuelke, as Renelle mentioned. I'm a UW nursing honors student. Originally, I'm from Waukesha area, and I plan to move there after graduation, which is just in a couple of months, which I was telling Renelle is just wild to me because college went by so fast. It was amazing, and it's just bittersweet that I'm almost done. So very excited. A little bit about the honors program in specific. It's a little bit different than some of the other honors programs in other other majors or schools at UW. What's unique and exciting about UW Nursing honors program is that it's kind of rooted in research. So what you get to do as an honors student is you're matched with a faculty member within the School of Nursing, and you can get involved in their research. You can take their research and take your own spin on it, but it's really what you make it. So my main focus as an honors student in this program was focusing on IPV in the prenatal period, specifically in the Indigenous community, because I want to go into labor and delivery, postpartum, or obstetrics nursing in general. So I figured this would be a great way to kind of combine the research side of nursing as well as the type of kind of bedside nursing that I want to go into right after graduation. So as an honors student, I was honored to be matched with Dr. Janelle Lupke. She is an assistant professor at the School of Nursing, and she holds an affiliate appointment for the American Indian Studies program and is a faculty member of the Campus Sexual Violence Research Initiative. She is such an expert in her field and has made so many great contributions to this area. And on top of that, she is an enrolled member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. Through being matched with Dr. Lubke, I was able to give or present a poster at the Native Nations Nursing Summit, which happens every year in Milwaukee. And at that summit, I presented a poster on similar research that I'm talking about today, specifically talking about IPV in Indigenous pregnant women. In that poster, I talked about how nurses in specific and healthcare providers can make a difference in this area. Today, I tried to gear the research more towards the general public, assuming that many of the people who are viewing this presentation aren't healthcare workers and are instead just members of the general public that want to do something about IPV. So that's kind of where we're going to take the research today. However, if you are a healthcare provider and are interested in making a difference that way, I'm happy to discuss that more as well. And I'll try to kind of talk about that a little bit throughout the presentation as well. Outside of the honors program, I'm also involved in a student org called Care for a Cause on UW's campus. I actually started this student organization now 4 years ago, which is another wild just concept to wrap my head around. But Care for a Cause is a student organization open to any student at UW. We're specifically aimed at addressing the financial burden of parenthood. So really, we just try to host free events for families in Madison. We do a holiday gift drive every December, and we send gifts off to children at a local elementary school. We do a free Easter egg hunt. So we really just try to make fun events like that accessible for families. And again, I like to think that that's another kind of part of my life that's related to this concept. Additionally, I work as a student ambassador at the School of Nursing, just as kind of like a little side job, which has been so fun. Basically, in that position, I just give tours of the building. I also will advise pre-nursing students who are interested in applying for the nursing program. And I do a couple of other things here and there for the School of Nursing. I also work as a nurse extern at SSM Health in Janesville. And this has been one of the greatest opportunities I've had as a student because I get to work on the labor and delivery unit, taking care of mothers and babies and birthing person. And like I mentioned, that's where I want to take my nursing degree after I graduate. So again, that's just been such an incredible experience. And another way that I've kind of seen this issue firsthand, which is both enlightening and, of course, very sad. And then my third and last job is I'm a CNA at UW University Hospital, except I actually just had my last day yesterday, which is bittersweet because I've been working there for a couple of years. I was in the float pool, so I really just got experience everywhere. So that is kind of my credentials. However, I want to recognize that in no means am I an expert in this topic. I'm still learning along with everybody here. So if you do have thoughts or input, I'd love to hear it. I will mention, but this is the first time I'm doing something like this. So still learning, but again, so happy to be here. And lastly, in my free time, I do enjoy reading. My favorite genres are romance and thrillers, and I'm also a big runner and baker. So with all that being said, I do just want to thank you all again for being here. I'm so happy that you are interested in this topic and that you want to learn more, and I'm so happy to be learning with you today. Before we move into the content, I do want to give an activation warning. This content discusses themes of domestic violence, interpersonal violence, and graphic personal accounts, which may be distressing or activating for some individuals. Please proceed with caution and take care of your mental health. Resources are available at the end of this presentation and they will be posted. I will put a little disclaimer out there that towards the beginning of this presentation, I'm going to be giving testimonials of Indigenous women who experienced IPV and their story. So that will probably be the most activating part of this presentation. So if you think that that might be a sensitive area, feel free to take a break and come back if and when you feel ready. And then I also want to mention that when I'll be primarily focusing on people who identify as female in this presentation. So I'll be using the words women and female, but I do want to recognize that IPV affects really all people, including those identifying as male, non-binary, and those in LGBTQ plus relationships, often at disproportionate rates. So I feel like that's important to recognize. And again, while I will be using female, woman, it's important to recognize that IPV can happen to anyone, and I don't want to be ignorant in that sense. Alrighty, so we will move on to a little discussion of what research I was focusing on in my literature review on this topic. The main source of research that I used for my review was a piece by Dr. Schuelke. It's called "It is Like a Curse, the Lived Experiences of the Intersection of Intergenerational Violence, Pregnancy, and Intimate Partner Violence among Urban Wisconsin Indigenous Women." This article can be found online if you're interested. Highly recommend if this is something that you want to learn more about, and I think everyone should read it. And like I said, this was the primary source of information that I used for this presentation and my poster at the summit. This study was focused on better understanding the lived experiences of Indigenous women who've experienced IPV. The specific research questions that this study was trying to answer include: what is the lived experience of IPV in the lives of Indigenous women living in urban areas, what the health needs are for these women, and what the impacts of IPV on the health and well-being of Indigenous women are. After the study was designed, the researchers ended up interviewing 34 Indigenous women. Of the participants, the average age was 38, and everybody had current or past history of IPV. The themes kind of revealed in the review of the interviews included barriers to help seeking after experiences of violence, especially given the COVID pandemic. Also, violence during the pregnancy period, and resiliency factors that facilitate healing. So as I share some of the testimonials from this piece of work, again, I want to give an activation warning. This is when I'll start to go into some of the details that might be distressing. And I also want to mention that all names have been replaced with pseudonyms. So the first story I would like to share is of Haley. She's a single mother of 2 school-age children who experienced emotional abuse and controlling behavior from her ex-partner, causing her to miss prenatal appointments and classes. She said, "When I was pregnant, I would not say that I had a great prenatal care because it became very restrictive in my house. It was like I really couldn't go anywhere because he was going to come with me. Because of his job, if he couldn't make it to a prenatal appointment, then he didn't want me to go. So we never did the birth classes. I went to like a small handful of my prenatal appointments." So I do hope to make this presentation accessible to everybody regardless of their experience in healthcare or experience with the prenatal period. So I will just mention that the correlation between going or seeking prenatal care and birth outcomes is very significant. So something like Haley's story, where she expresses having to miss her prenatal classes or miss her prenatal appointments and really not attend any classes, likely had huge implications on her pregnancy. Besides limiting prenatal care, several women reported that IPV affected their ability to feel happy during pregnancy. For example, Danica, a divorced mother with a 4-year-old, experienced sadness, isolation, and fear. She said, "I would say that it wasn't a happy pregnancy. I was sad during my pregnancy and I didn't want to tell anyone. I had been so withdrawn during that period because I didn't want anyone to see me because I was afraid that they would call the cops because of the bruises. Some of my friends gave up on me because they were sick of hearing about the drama. He still kept hitting me while I was pregnant too. I debated for weeks about whether to get an abortion. It just wasn't a good time. So I feel like this testimonial really reflects the emotional and, of course, physical aspect of IPV during pregnancy. Um, I know when I think of pregnancy, and I'm sure when many people think of pregnancy, they think it's a very happy time, an exciting time. But for women experiencing IPV, it's oftentimes quite the opposite. Um, and the stories of these women demonstrate the outcomes of IPV, like I've been mentioning. And although I've been focusing kind of on the emotional, psychological aspect of things, there's obviously also physical consequences, such as miscarriage, preterm labor, and premature birth. For example, Mallory, who is now single with no children, experienced severe physical IPV perpetrated by her ex-partner, resulting in a miscarriage. She said, "We were in a fight. He punched me while I'm pregnant in the first trimester. He hit me, I hit the floor. I'm on my hands and knees. He kicked me in the stomach with boots so hard that I'm literally coming off the ground. I lost the baby." So in highlighting the voices of these survivors, I hope that the devastating effects of IPV during pregnancy are very clear, if they weren't already. However, while listening to these stories, you might have some questions, perhaps starting with what is IPV, or intimate partner violence? So I have the definition here on the slide as physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, and emotional or psychological aggression, including coercive tactics by a current or former intimate partner. So as you can kind of see in this definition, there's multiple aspects of IPV, and it likely will look different for each person experiencing it. IPV is it also might include former or current intimate partners and all types of relationships, including homosexual and heterosexual. And these relationships may or may not include sexual intimacy. Unfortunately, IPV is common, and like I mentioned, it can vary from individual to individual. And like we already have seen, IPV can have devastating outcomes both within and outside of the prenatal period. With that being said, like I mentioned, IPV is unfortunately extremely common. I think more common than many people are aware of. We found that IPV affects 10 million people in the US every year, and this prevalence is declining, but family violence still constitutes 11% of all violence. 1 in 4 women report physical violence by their partner at some point during their lifetime. And according to CDC's 2016 to 2017 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, about 41% of women and 26% of men experienced contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. And these instances had related impacts that were reported. So if you can't read the slide, it's just repeating that statistic that 41% of women experienced contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime, which is huge and so unfortunate, especially given the very apparent consequences, which we'll dive into next. So of the prevalence of IPV comes psychological and physical health consequences, economic costs, exacerbated health disparities, and very high mortality. These statistics and aspects of IPV reflect a significant public health concern that can lead to all of these disparities and more. Regarding health consequences, we have seen significant physical injuries, HIV and sexually transmitted infections, asthma, insomnia, headaches, chronic pain, and GI disorders, including IBS, resulting from IPV, which really you can see that it affects kind of every aspect of the body, from the brain and all the way down to the GI system and beyond. And the most frequent forms of injury reported by both male and female victims were mental or emotional harm, also minor bruises or scratches, cuts, major bruises, and black eyes. A statistic that I find remarkable in a very horrible way is that more injuries to women were reported from IPV than motor vehicle accidents, rapes, and muggings combined, which is just so alarming. Moving into the psychological consequences of IPV, there's a clear link between IPV and depression, PTSD, panic attacks, and suicide attempts and death. In a study kind of focused on the emotional impacts of IPV, it was found that 1 in 13 IPV victims were fearful, 1 in 5 were injured, 1 in 14 were concerned for their safety, 1 in 7 had PTSD symptoms, and 1 in 23 were in need of medical care. Kind of additional psychological impacts that were reported include difficulty concentrating and remembering, activity limitations, including difficulty walking, dressing, or bathing. So once again, these IPV instances are really affecting all aspects of life, even the ability to take care of yourself. Moving into economic costs, I think this section is kind of something that people might not think about when they think about the kind of burden of IPV, but it's very much relevant. So the cost of IPV in the United States is immense, and the CDC estimates that $5.8 billion are paid annually in medical and mental health treatment, lost productivity, and lost earnings. The majority of these costs, which is $4.1 billion, are for direct medical care and mental health treatment. Women of IPV have a 4-fold excess use of healthcare services as compared to those who are not abused. And I think we can think of this statistic both as a good thing, because it shows that some victims of IPV are seeking out and receiving medical care. But of course, any use of medical care that is preventable is resulting in costs that can be in some aspect avoided. And another aspect of cost is women having to skip work because of IPV. So the CDC found that a woman victim of IPV lost on average more than 40 days of work each year, which is devastating for both the woman and the economy as a whole. Moving into exacerbated health disparities, IPV disproportionately affects multiracial women, Indigenous women, and Black women. And in a recent study of potential years of life lost due to IPV related mortality, the authors found that racial and ethnic minority people died 9 or more years earlier than their white counterparts, which again highlights the need to prevent and address IPV, especially related to these populations. We will talk about more about the disparities in the Indigenous population shortly. And finally, of course, there's mortality related to IPV. There are at least 1,400 women who die annually as the result of IPV, and one of these contributors is mortality by suicide. In addition, maternal mortality and IPV are related, which we'll talk about more thoroughly. But it was found in 2019, 7.2% of maternal deaths listed IPV as a contributing factor. So that's of all the birthing people or mothers who died as pregnant or once their babies are delivered, 7.2 of those deaths were related to IPV. And what I think is even more alarming is that 46.7% of those 7.2 found IPV or found homicides by IPV to be the cause of death. So 50% of those mothers who listed what IPV was listed as a contributing factor to their death 50% of them were killed. It has been found that homicide may be the most common cause of maternal death, like I mentioned, and this leads us to specifically IPV during pregnancy. So I think there's multiple reasons why IPV experienced during pregnancy is especially dangerous. Perhaps the most obvious one is that there's 2 victims, whereas usually there might just be 1. And abuse can affect both the mother and baby, leading to devastating effects for both, including mental illness, substance use, and fetal infant outcomes such as miscarriage, low birth weight, and preterm birth. Kind of an interesting statistic for you all, while most women who reported physical abuse during pregnancy had also been abused before pregnancy, about half of the respondents reported abuse for the first time during pregnancy. There's a couple reasons why researchers think that this continuation or escalation of IPV is happening. One, in part due to the perpetrator questioning the paternity, even if there's no reason or indication for the perpetrator to believe that. There's also a shift of attention to the baby, so this might kind of cause some feelings of jealousy and result in the perpetrator kind of lashing out, per se. And finally, there's the exacerbation of power imbalances that likely already existed before the pregnancy. And IPV is likely to continue into the postpartum period as the new mom is recovering and extremely vulnerable as she heals from childbirth. So kind of shifting gears to the specific maternal and fetal effects listed on the slides. For the pregnant woman or pregnant person, we see an effect between PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and emotional dysregulation. IPV also increases the risk of infection because this prolonged stress response impairs the immune system. Substance use from IPV also directly causes fetal effects, including low birth weight, miscarriage, fetal injury, small for gestational age, preterm birth, and stillbirth, which means loss of baby. So, as mentioned, I will be discussing more about IPV specifically affecting Indigenous people. Indigenous women are disproportionately affected by IPV compared to other racial and ethnic groups. They're very close to being the most affected ethnic and racial group when comparing all populations. And, excuse me, this disparity is deeply rooted in historical trauma, structural violence, intersectionality, and issues of jurisdiction and sovereignty. More than 4 in 5 Indigenous women experience violence in their lifetime. And in a 2021 to 2022 study, Indigenous women aged 15 and over were 33 times more likely to be hospitalized due to family violence compared to non-Indigenous women. This is associated with acute and chronic mental health impacts, severe injury, and of course, even death. These effects are exacerbated in the prenatal period by barriers such as lack of prenatal care, lack of support, and adverse pregnancy experience due to stress, fear, and sadness, as we heard during those testimonials at the beginning of the presentation. So I hope that we can kind of put all of the components together and recognize that the increased risk of IPV for Indigenous women combined with the increased risk of IPV for pregnant women leads to a huge risk of IPV for pregnant Indigenous women, which again is the focus of this research. So I hope that after hearing these statistics, you feel motivated to take action. So again, I tried to share some ways that you can involve yourself as just a member of the general public. However, there's a multitude of interventions that healthcare workers, nurses can take or can participate in to make a even bigger impact. However, today we'll be discussing just ways that anybody can get involved and take action. So the first way is to educate yourself, and everybody who is watching this presentation is already doing this, so we're on the right track. You can further your education by attending more information sessions and researching reputable sources, which I'll share a little bit more on the next slide. You can also educate yourself by listening to survivors' stories. Often, I think that's the best way to kind of immerse yourself in the problem, and you can think back to those stories all the time, and I think they just have the biggest impact. I think it's important also to question your previously held beliefs. We can say that we're unbiased, but to actually act in a way that's unbiased is even more important. So it's a common belief that, or it's a common question that somebody might have, that like, why can't survivors just leave? But there's a whole multitude of reasons why this isn't the case, including it's found that after a woman leaves an abusive relationship, they're even more in danger than while they're in the relationship. So it's much more difficult to just leave than people might think. So again, just another way to educate yourself is to kind of interrogate yourself, I guess, and just question these previously held beliefs that you may or may not have. And then you can also recognize signs just as a friend, a family member, or a stranger. Some of these signs might include unexplained injuries, depression, anxiety, withdrawal, and being unaware of household finances. So, of course, there might be several reasons why somebody might have one of these signs, but it's never inappropriate to recognize this and investigate further. The second way that you can be involved and take action against IPV is by raising awareness. So you can start the conversation about IPV. I don't think it should be a taboo subject because the more we talk about it, the more it will be recognized and treated. So sharing the stories that you hear, as long as you have permission from the victims, is a great first step. And just continuing to bring it up and even sharing resources with others, even the resources that are presented today. And then, of course, also sharing your knowledge. You're taking the time to educate yourself today, so might as well share it with others and spread the wealth. A third and perhaps less obvious way that you can take action against IPV is actually just by promoting positive relationships in your circle. We mentioned that a key to making a difference is prevention, especially in public health nursing. So this is a way that you can do that. One way is encouraging healthy gender expression. So one of the, again, like bias that can exacerbate this issue is imposing beliefs like boys will be boys, and kind of taking action against those beliefs is one way that we can kind of prevent some of these complications. And then physically just illustrating healthy relationships for younger peers, or if you have children, for your children, such as healthy conflict resolution strategies. So of course it's easier said than done, but practicing some of the skills that you hope your peers and children or anybody in your life will use is so important. As we mentioned throughout some of these other concepts, supporting survivors is huge. You might not think you know anybody affected by IPV, but given the statistics that we mentioned, it's more than likely that you do. So listening to anybody who is sharing their story, believing them, validating what they've been through, and then referring them to some of the resources that you know are out there and that I will share today is the first step. Of course, if you see something, say something. This applies to so many aspects of life, but especially IPV. Like I mentioned, those signs, unexplained injuries, depression, anxiety, withdrawal, being unaware of household finances, among many others, are so important to recognize and then act upon. And then another one of those kind of biases that we need to change is victim blaming. So giving excuses for IPV, we really need to hold offenders accountable and again, validate those experiencing it. Otherwise, nothing is ever going to change. And that might cause the survivors to not want to then share their story again if we don't validate what's happening to them. Then we can, on a bigger scale, we can advocate for policy change. One way is by lobbying for increased funding for victim services and advocating for stronger legal protections. But these are kind of the bigger ways that you can act as an advocate. But even just sharing social media posts that promote prevention, education, and start the conversation is a great way to be an advocate and kind of get things moving towards policy change. And then attending events and showing your support for local organizations is a great way to get involved. The Ho-Chunk Nation Domestic Abuse Division on Facebook, which I will have linked on the next slide or on my infographic, I can't quite remember. They are always posting about local events. Most recently on February 8th, they had a Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month event, which just looked incredible. So just attending these events, sharing what's going on is an easy and great way to get involved and also just meet others and hear their stories. I'm going to pause my presentation for a moment and present this infographic. I figured that we might need like some more clear resources and links and things. So I made a separate infographic that is linked in my slides and that will post with this presentation. But I'll quickly go through it. It's a lot of what I already shared, just with a little bit more text and information. So we have educating yourself, again, raising awareness, promoting positive relationships, supporting survivors, policy change, and then attending those events. And then down here, I have just a couple more resources linked. Alrighty, switching back over to the presentation again, one moment. Okay. So this slide is resources more geared towards those who might be experiencing IPV themselves. So I tried to give a description about what each of these resources is, because I feel like it's easy to just have resources on a slide, but it's sometimes unclear about why I would use these resources. So we have hotlines here, some national resources. I tried to also curate some of them to Wisconsin. And then we also have the link to the Ho-Chunk Nation Social Services Department. And I included some of their specific resources here too, which I was actually very impressed about how much they offer. So definitely a great resource there. And then there's quite a few, like I said, Wisconsin specific resources on here that perhaps we didn't even know existed. So it's great to have a starting, and there's really so much more out there. So hopefully, I'm just hoping that by sharing these resources, anybody who needs them will find what they need. With that being said, we've reached our conclusion. So again, I just want to thank you all for taking time out of your Wednesday to hear my presentation and learn with me. I encourage you to take the stories that I shared at the beginning of this presentation with you and share or use the resources included in this presentation as needed. I really appreciate everyone being here, and if anyone has questions, I would love to answer them. But thank you again for listening.
Thanks, Bella. That was
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank
So
you
we
so much.
don't have any questions or comments in the chat right now. So we'll pause for a second if anybody has anything. Yep, Heather, I will share this presentation. It's being recorded, so it'll be on the Department of Health website and our Facebook page. Bella, are we able to share the slides directly with people?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And Heather, I can email you slides.
I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate the resources. I do get a lot of clients in my office that I do not work in a domestic abuse shelter, or that is not the line of work that I provide, but I do a lot of referrals for my clients in those kind of situations. So I really appreciate those reference resources because I will probably utilize them. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, I feel like I mentioned, there's so much out there, and sometimes I think that can be overwhelming. So hopefully that provides a little more clear explanation of what each resource is. But I'm very happy that you'll be using them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bella, are you in Madison doing your work?
Yes, I am. So I'm at UW-Madison. I graduate in May, and then I'll likely go back to Milwaukee area to practice as a nurse. But for now, I'm here, and I just love Madison. So
Great. I'm the board president for domestic abuse intervention here in County, Madison, and I will likely reach out to you a little more to see if we can get some connection with you before you leave town, and maybe do a training for either the board or staff there around some of the more cultural issues, if that's okay with you.
yes, that would be amazing. It's so nice to hear from you and to meet you, and I definitely hope that we can communicate in the future. That would be wonderful.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Heather, if you want to send me your email address, I can help getting you and Bella connected.
Yeah, I actually have a UW address as well, and all over the place. It's just, I'll just send it to you in the chat. It'll be easier.
Okay, perfect. Well, hearing no other questions, Pinagigi, thank you, Bella. This has been wonderful. I'm glad you made a new connection. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As a reminder, this session is recorded and will be available on the Department of Health website and Facebook page. We look forward to seeing you at our next session, which will be next Wednesday, March 12th, from 1 to 2 p.m., and we'll be joined by the Ho-Chunk Nation language session. You can use the same link as you did today to join in all future sessions. To add the recurring WebEx link to your calendar, please email Jamie and I, and we'll be able to forward you that invite. We welcome all feedback related to this series. If you have a topic that you would like to learn more about, or if you would like to present on a topic, please reach out to Jamie and I, and we will put our email address in the chat. And I will pause here while everyone can grab that info out of the chat. Mostly myself, because I can only write so fast. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. See you later.
Thank you, everyone.